Ndala, 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 ndala. Welcome back to my channel. So today I had a little bit of time, so I decided to speak about a subject that I had previously mentioned a little bit, and I wanted to go a little bit deeper to provide you with some more context. So we've talked about the Bamileke tradition, which is my tradition, and as I've mentioned before, in Africa there are lots and lots of ethnic groups, of traditions. Tradition vary from one ethnic group to the other. It varies also from a village to another village. It can vary also from family to family. So I'm just speaking from my perspective. I know it can be surprising for some people, but I can only speak from my own perspective. And if I'm speaking from things that I've observed, things I've come to know or I've witnessed, I'll mention that. But for the most part, when I'm providing you with this content, it's mostly from my own personal experience, my first-hand knowledge. And then if I'm getting this information from books or anything like that, usually I try to put the reference somewhere so you guys can go and learn also for yourself. So today we're talking about the Bamileke tradition. This is my tradition. This is the tradition that I come from. A lot of the videos on this channel deal specifically with that. Some videos are more general in terms of African spirituality. But both of my parents are from Bamileke tradition. They're from the same village, different part of that village. And this is just to illustrate that even though they are from the same village, they are from different part of the village, and each of them have different tradition within their own families. Okay, so this is a way for you to understand that it's going to be very difficult for people who are coming from an organized religion, Catholicism, Christianity, or even Islam, to understand that you may have the same spiritual path within the same group, within the same ethnic group, or within the same spiritual tradition, but the rituals, the traditions may be different from family to family. And that's not something to be frightened about or anything like that. It just means that as your family learns certain things, there are certain things that they wanted to pass on to their own descendant. They found ways to do certain things that were better for their own family, for their own bloodline. So it's not something to be scared of or anything like that. It's something that's normal. Diversity, one of the things that if you go to Africa and you go to different places, diversity is kind of a given. It's going to be it's very seldom that you will find people doing the exact same thing the exact same way. And that's why sometimes there's also an echo of familiarity, because even though they're not doing it the exact same way that you will do, you see a common thread in there. You see some common principles. You will see some common perceptions, also some common values as well. So it's more those commonalities that tie us all together within African spirituality, for all Black people, no matter where you are. But at the same time, you have to respect that there are very sometimes large and huge differences, and sometimes those differences are very minimal. That's just a point to take on. The other point that I've mentioned, if you watch my video on the Bamileke tradition, is not a religion. So this is to explain to you that you cannot convert to become a Bamileke. You cannot try to convert other people either. It's not a kind of a code that you put on when you feel like it. You feel like doing some of those other things. The other things that you don't like, you don't do them, and things like that. It's really not that type of mind frame that you should come onto if you want to understand the tradition, or if you aim at some point to be part of it, or for your children to be part of it. Okay, now that this premise is done, I am going to speak about 3 fundamental ways into which people come from the tradition or enter the Bamileke tradition. The first way we're going to talk about is through birthright. So basically, you are born in the tradition, your parents are Bamileke, or at least one of them is, and the second component of that, they're practicing the tradition. So the simple fact that you are born of two Bamileke parents, or one Bamileke parent, or you're born into a Bamileke tradition, it doesn't fully activate until you are aware or practicing or starting to practice the actual tradition, the rituals, the understanding that you share the values that are being underlined or promoted. So there's 2 kind of component to the birthright pathway. And it's obvious because if you're born into the tradition and people are exalting the culture around you, it's going to be much more easy for you to assimilate and to learn about the culture, to understand it as well. It doesn't mean that you're going to agree with everything. It doesn't mean that you're going to follow it to the T, but it means that you have some awareness of what is being done within the culture because you observed it, because it was taught to you, because it was spoken to you, because you had the chance to questions and learn, basically. What best or greater way of doing that if you start doing that since childhood, so you can really soak into all of that knowledge and gain this understanding. Obviously, as a child, your perception of everything and the knowledge that you acquired will expand as you mature to adulthood and start, seeing how all of those pieces fits together, seeing where is your place in the world and how this traditional knowledge can help you in your, modern day life. But the component here is that if you have this ancestry, your parents or your grandparents are from the tradition, this is knowledge that can be attainable to you if you go back to your own village and if you ask the elders. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because you may have been born from Cameroonian parents, Bamileke parents, or what have you, but then maybe you moved away abroad to Europe or wherever, and so you were not really, and maybe your parents also tried to immerse you in the local culture where you moved abroad from. Usually, aside from the food, you may not know much about your traditional culture. But that culture remains accessible to you because your parents are from a specific village. In that village, you have your own place. So you can always go back to the elders in that village and find out. You can also, if they are still alive, you can go to your grandparents. Most grandparents retired in the village. If they stayed in Cameroon, if they stayed in their own village, you may find some uncles, some extended family members that may be able to impart that knowledge into you. So that knowledge is somewhat accessible to you, and is the fact that you can access it that actually makes you part of the Bamileke tradition. So yes, by having a birthright and by having that within your vicinity, it's the first step, will you say? But the second step is actually gaining that knowledge and actually applying that knowledge into your day-to-day life. And you will see, no matter what pathways you use to get into the tradition, the Bamileke tradition, there's always going to be the component of you practicing that tradition, of you understanding it and making it to use. Because without that component, you are never going to be part of the tradition. The tradition is a living tradition. It only lives through the people who are practicing it. So that component is always going to be there. So the first one, birthright, and gain access to the traditional knowledge through your family member or extended family members. Now, the second one is by marriage. So if you marry into the tradition, you marry into the tradition because your wife is from there or your husband is from this tradition, and you gain access to the tradition. So now maybe the marriage is done in a traditional way. You follow what the traditional requirements are. That would be the first step into tradition. By following that means you're already practicing that particular tradition by following what is expected to you as a bride or a groom in order to get married. Then, similar to the first pathway, you gain access to the knowledge of the tradition. So they're going to teach you how to eat, the type of food you eat at certain times, where is this food. They're going to impart into you the values. You learn already a little bit through the wedding process, but they will talk to you about the plans, about funerals and all the different things. So you through your marriage, you're gaining access to information and knowledge of the tradition. This assumes that whoever your spouse is, groom or bride, that her or her family is a practicing family, meaning that a family that has a knowledge of a tradition and that follows the tradition. And that's not evident because it's not because somebody is Bamileke that they're actually practicing the tradition. Some people decided just to become Christian or Muslim or join whatever else religion and usually don't practice anymore their African spirituality. So that's also important to note. If you're looking into somebody who's Bamileke, you have to also inquire as to whether they are practicing. And if they're not practicing, it may also mean that they didn't have that much interest. Maybe they have a little bit, maybe they are a little bit scared. You'll find that some Africans are scared of their own tradition, of learning about it, of knowing about it, for all sort of reasons that we're not going to get into now. But it may be also a possibility or an opportunity for you to speak to them about that. And they may feel a lot more confident going and learning about it with their spouse, who's going to be by their side while they learn and explore their own tradition. So it may be a great way to bring the two of you together, because you may be learning more about her tradition with her, and she may be rediscovering things with you as well. And as partners, as marriage partners, that may be a lifetime journey. And I think it's going to be very joyful or very rewarding to do that together. So the access to the knowledge has to be present, has to be there. So if your wife doesn't know about it, your wife or husband doesn't practice the tradition, see if her parents or her grandparents, if they're still alive, practice it, so you can start getting that knowledge from your own family unit first. Okay, don't go to see people who are external to your family if that knowledge is accessible with members of the families that you know that are loving towards you, that you can trust, basically. That would be the first way to start. So while you get married to that person, and as you learn about the tradition and you start applying some of those values, some of those fundamental principles, and some of those ways, you are actually expanding and making your way into the tradition. And you see that the first pathway to the Bamileke tradition through the birthright is something that's inalienable, meaning that it's not something you can get rid of. Your parents and your mom and your dad are Bamileke. You can't, even if you change your nationality or whatever, you'll always be Bamileke. Why? Because this is where you're born. This is who your parents are. It's a little bit like if you're American and your parents are born in America. You can go to other country, change your nationality, but every single time when they ask you who your parents are, it's going to bring you straight back to the United States, because that's where your parents are. That's the nationality that they had. Okay, so it's kind of the same. There's some similarities into that, meaning that the cloak here, the important element here is that it's not a religion. It's not something that you can just decide, I don't want to be part of this anymore, and I take it off, I put it there, and then when I feel like it, I'm going to go back to it. I'm going to come back to it. That's why the requirements that's always present is that you have to practice in order to be part of the tradition. And that's also prevent you from, misusing the tradition or abusing or exploiting the tradition. Because with that practice, with those principles, there are balances, checks and balances are being put in place. But ultimately, whether you are born into it or if you are marrying into the culture, so there is another fundamental bond that's created between you and the person you're marrying. We always say that marriage is forever. You're supposed to be with your spouse until death do you apart. I know that in modern days, marriage has been devalued a lot, but the idea here is that this is a person that you are looking and seeking to build the rest of your life with. And so it's a lifetime journey. And so by getting into the tradition with that mindset that it's a lifetime journey, it's a lifetime commitment, the sensibilities and the openness you may have with spirit, with the spiritual tradition of the Bamileke, is going to be a lot more rewarding and a lot more genuine. And of course, here when I'm speaking about you going towards practicing anything, is really with your open heart and with a genuine heart. If you're doing this because you want to test the tradition to see if you can find some loopholes and things like that, that's going to be reflected in the experience you're going to have. If you come with bad intention or with trying to be mischievous, that aspect, that negative energy is going to translate in your experience. Because we're not talking about individuals, we're really talking about the spirit world and spirituality. And your intent is not going to be what you tell other people, is really going to be what is within yourself. So the first one was the birthright. The second one was through marriage. The third one, which is a little bit less common, but still a doable avenue, is through adoption. And here, adoption, of course, I'm saying maybe you were born across the world and you were adopted by a Bamileke family. Maybe you were born in Cameroon but from a different ethnicity and you were adopted by a Bamileke family. So it doesn't really matter where you come from, but the point is that you entered this family that through adoptions. Some people recognize you as their child, and therefore they're going to treat you as part of that family, and they're going to share with you the tradition. So it gives you access to the tradition as well. You provided that your adopted parents are practicing it. So all of this that I'm telling you, the pathway requires that there is somebody there to share that knowledge with you, and somebody that's within your family or extended family. And if we want to talk about ways outside of that, we can do that in a different videos. But I think it's very important to underline here that you start with your own family. And you, even within your family, you start with people who are, that you know you can trust, with people who love you. Because they're the one that are going to be more, that the knowledge that they're going to share with you is going to be more beneficial, and it's going to be more genuine. There's no point if you know this uncle is mean and he's really bad and he dislikes you. That's not the person you're going to go to get the information. Start with the people that you know who love you, that support you on this path and are willing to share the information with you. And go as far as you can go. So for me, I will even, if you can, go directly to your grandparents or your great-grandparents if they're still alive. That's the source. That's where you should go first. And then you could trickle down to see how your parents are perceiving those rituals or those tradition or that knowledge at all. And I guess there are different ways to make this experience a lot more rewarding or a lot more joyful if you go through instances. For example, weddings and marriage are very loving opportunities. Opportunities for where people are going to be in a great mood, are going to be more joyful. It's an opportunity also for you to show your generosity, because usually weddings are a big party. So that's an opportunity to have people come there. It's a wonderful opportunity to have the grandparents be part of the process, and for you to have a genuine access to that just by, for example, learning about how the wedding is being prepared, what are the conditions, what are the requirements, what are the things that you're supposed to be doing. So of course, also food is a great way to gain information about and knowledge about the culture, where the plants, what type of spices are being used, where they're coming from, which region, when do you eat or prepare certain dishes during the time of the year. All of that information, as mundane as it may sound, because you may thinking this is just about food, or this is just about things that are required to get married, but the fundamental and the basics are there. And as you see that, you will, for example, understand why the groom and the bride's family needs to come together. What is the foundation or the principle, the value behind that? Why you need to have blessings from both sides? What's the foundation, the value behind that? And as you look at that, the way you eat, why you eat those particular dishes at this particular time of the year, all of those things are foundations to understanding the Bamileke tradition itself. And of course, as you go around in Cameroon or different part of Africa, you will see that there are a lot of similarities in terms of those common values. So these are the three main ways into the Bamileke tradition. I hope this was useful. I know that a lot of you are looking into your ancestry and things of that nature. For those of you who are in Cameroon or who are in Africa, I would love to know, you can share if you think those three pathways are the primary one, or if you find that other pathways should be primary to that. Just let me know in the comment section. And also for those who are coming from the diaspora, when you are thinking about your ancestry of where to start with your parents. Try to retrace your history where you are. Try to find out who was the first person that you know of, if you go as far as you can go with the actual records that you have, in terms of, some people in the United States, for example, that your family may have moved around from state to state. Go back as far as you can within that history before you do the bridge to Africa, and see if there are some things that to see if there are something that can bring you back all the way to a specific country or ethnicity. For those of you who are curious, I did a video on DNA testing and my take on that. So if you are interested, you can look at that. I think it's in the member, it's part of the member videos. And of course, if you have any other questions about this, please leave them below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.